right, everybody, we should be live. Thank you for joining us. And thank you if you've been keeping up with us all week with our media literacy series on Monday, or Tuesday. We started on Tuesday. On Tuesday, we started with a video from Natalie about what is media literacy and why is it important. And then on Wednesday, we followed that up with Lisa, who sadly could not join us today. She's just out of town. Followed up with a video about knowing your source and media bias. And then yesterday, we had a video where most of the CMAC staff who are joining us today, a good chunk of us, we analyzed some real life social media and article posts and put them through the information, ran them through the different ideas that we'd covered on Tuesday and Wednesday. And today, we have some very exciting guests. We're really happy to have Professor Faith Sidlow with us and Fabiola Ramirez from 2447, and we're gonna ask some questions. But before we jump into that, for those who are unfamiliar, could we start with Faith? Could we get a little bit of your background, and in case anybody watching isn't familiar with who you are?
Sure. My name's Faith Sidlow. I am an associate professor at Fresno State in broadcast and multi-platform journalism. And I oversee a newscast, radio podcast, and the Radio Television Digital News Association organization. Before that, I worked for 28 years at KC24 as a news reporter and a news anchor.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Fabiola, how would people know you, or why should people know you?
Well, I work here locally in Fresno for KC24 and CBS 47. Faith Sidlow was my professor at Fresno State. Everything I know, learned from her. And right now I'm a reporter for the morning show, 5 to 7 a.m. Those are my hours for reporting on live TV. And then afterwards, I usually just go gather content, put a story together. And right now working from home, that's the new norm for right now.
Yeah. And it definitely is very different right now. I guess we have a series of questions that we would like to ask you, and then we have opened up the opportunity for questions on Facebook. We're streaming live on Facebook, so if you want to ask a question in the comments on Facebook for Faith, Fabiola, or the CMAC staff, we'd be happy to answer them here. And then I believe, Natalie, we have a call out on Instagram and some Facebook groups as well. So if you're watching live, submit your questions and we'll answer those at the end. But we also have a handful of questions for Faith and Fabiola that staff put together. So we'll kind of jump into those. Natalie, what's our first question?
Right, thanks, Cal. And thank you, Faith and Fabiola, for being here today. We're really excited to chat with you today. So we kicked off the series with my video, which was, what is media literacy and why is it important? So I want to ask you guys the same question. Why is media literacy important to you? Faith, you want to start?
Yeah, it's important to me because it's important to get correct and accurate information so that we can make decisions. That's the short of it. I don't even want to confuse it with a lot of other words. It's getting accurate information so we can make decisions.
Excellent. And Fabiola, what about you? Why is media literacy important to you?
Well, I think in the time right now that we're living in, and with our phones and social media, a lot of people might not be getting the right information, the right facts. And then to me, it's really important right now because it's kind of a one time where it's like, who do people believe? And so media literacy is really important for me at this point, in the fact that I'm hoping that people are getting their sources from the right place, getting their news from the right place. And in a way, it falls a lot of responsibility as someone who works in the news to make sure that I am providing the accurate news and facts that I'm able to gather.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. I think that definitely sums up why media literacy is important, and really something that we've been trying to emphasize all week. So I kind of want to ask you guys a little bit about your background. Why did you pursue a career in news and media? What drew you into this area? What excites you about it? Fabiola, let's start with you on this one.
Well, actually, it's actually so funny that Faith Sidlow is here with me, because I actually started off as a multimedia major, and I just wanted to do behind the scenes film editing. That kind of was my passion, and I took a class with her, and she's the one that really got me into journalism and writing and news. And she started kind of making me dig into it and try to figure out what I like, what I don't like, what options they were. And I fell in love with it. I mean, since I was little, I knew I liked film and I knew I liked telling stories. I just didn't know that I could put those two together. And so I'm such a big pusher for college when it comes to the youth, because college has helped me, get where I want to be, but also do something that I love. And college was a way to explore those things. And from there, I just fell in love with telling the stories, meeting the community, getting those stories across. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Awesome. And Faith, what about you? Why did you pursue this career path?
I want to first say that, Fabi, it's been so satisfying to watch you on the air too, because you're doing a super job, and I'm really proud of the journalist that you've become. It was Watergate. It was Watergate. That's why I got involved in journalism. I just wanted to save the world, I guess, and do investigative reporting. Originally, I wanted to be a foreign correspondent, and then when I completed my degree at San Diego State, and Fresno was my first job, and I came here and got married, and then the foreign correspondent thing kind of went out the door. But I was able to have a really successful career here in Fresno, and I was a consumer reporter for 5 years, and so I was digging and doing investigative reporting and helping solve problems for people, and it was very gratifying. You feel like you're making a difference every day, and continuing to do that now as a professor, because when you have students like Fabi, that is the meaning of success, because now she's carrying on something that I started for myself, but I'm watching all of these students do the same thing. And now we have another Watergate, basically, that's going on right now, where the media is kind of rethinking itself and becoming this new thing that we're still all trying to figure out, and bringing it back to where we are with media literacy. That's why this is even more important than ever, because there are so many sources of information out there. But if you can stick to people like Fabiola, or and I know sometimes it's used in a negative context, but the mainstream media, you are going to get accurate information.
Yeah, I know. Right now, it's definitely a time to, fact check and know your sources, and it's more important now than ever. But Faith, having worked in this field for nearly 30 years, what do you hope the average person knew about media or the news?
What I wish that people knew about the media and the news is that that journalists, reporters do everything they can to report accurately and fairly. And I know that there are bad seeds out there. There are opinion people out there, commentators who are not journalists, even if they work for a news station or a news network. I wish people understood the difference between journalism and opinion. That's my biggest wish, because I think if that was better understood, there wouldn't be all of this confusion about what's true and what's not. Because when someone gives their opinion, it doesn't have to be true. It doesn't have to be factual. It's just an opinion. But when someone reports the news, it has to be backed up by facts.
Yeah, definitely. So then how many different outlets do you get your news from? And Fabi, this is a question for both of you. How many sources do you guys check or consume when you guys are looking for news? So Fabiola, you want to start on this one?
Yeah, well, honestly, I go through so many different sources, but it also depends on what story I'm doing. And different stories obviously require different types of sources. And I want people to know that whenever we get a story assigned and we need to get a professional involved and get the sources right, we do some digging. I mean, there is hours spent on emailing people, getting, information from websites, trying to get stats, trying to make sure that we have all the right information. And I think something that we always make clear is whenever we're going to say something that is not obviously our opinion whatsoever, it's facts, we will say according to, or, blank doctor said. So it's stuff that we're not saying this is it. These are facts that we're getting from professionals. So I get my sources from so many different places, but also when I'm going to do a story, I always, go to different types of sources depending what the story is about.
Excellent. So Faith, how many sources do you recommend the average consumer try to have or look for when they're consuming news journalism?
Yeah, I think that's kind of an individual choice. I was looking at my phone, and so this is basically what I go through every day. But I pay for some of my sources too. So I have a paid subscription to the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the Fresno Bee. And then CNN I don't pay for, but you can get all of their content for free, NPR and BBC. So those are my main go-to sources that I get alerts from. And then I will go through Twitter, but I'm very careful about the sources that I find on Twitter. Twitter is not a source. Twitter, people who are posting on Twitter post from sources. So some people might post from something called 70 News or cbsnews.com.co, and those are not legitimate sources. You can watch out for the .co after the .com because that's usually a telltale sign. So look for that mainstream media again. If you see a story on Twitter and you want to find out more about it, which you should, and all you see are these Biz Standard News and InfoWars, you won't see InfoWars on Twitter, but this is a red flag when you don't see New York Times or Wall Street Journal or Washington Post. When you see publications that you don't recognize, that's when you see a red flag. So I watch out for those. When there's something that just my gut says, I don't think this is quite right, I will check it with Snopes or with Fact Check. Google has a great fact checker that you can add as an extension. So I will take the next step. And I also have my students do the same thing. When they report something in one of their stories, and I am pretty sure it's not accurate, then I will have them take the next step too and verify it. I will say I was embarrassed this last semester in my class because students asked me about this one video where it apparently was a Chinese, what do you call it when they're a training, right? A training for COVID. And remember where they took like the fishing net and put it over the guy's head? And my students said, oh my gosh, is that real? And I said, oh, I think it is. And a student raised his hand and he said, no, this was a training. And so we looked it up in class to see what it really was. And yes, it was a training. So even I get caught once in a while. That's why it's so important for everyone to be careful.
Yeah, and that leads me to my next question is, how do you check for the media bias that you consume? Like for media bias in the media you consume. You just mentioned a few things. You check Snopes, you look at the source, but when you're scrolling through Twitter or Facebook, it's really easy to just see something and have an immediate reaction to it, right? Or you see several of your friends liked it or loved it or had a sad face or an angry face, So how do you check for that when you're just, you're trying to scroll through Facebook and just, kill some time?
I gave you a link to put up. I don't know if you want to share that now or not.
We'll add it to the chat. Yeah.
This is from allsides.com. And basically what allsides.com does is they do rely on their readers to vote on the bias in a particular news story, but they will put up a story from the left, from the right, and from the center, same story, so you can look at all of the different ways that this particular story was covered. But they have a list of all of the different publications and blogs and organizations, some of those that I mentioned that were not legitimate organizations, and you can see whether it's far left, center, far right. And so here's a good example right here for this. They have COVID-19 resources, but you can see perspectives, anti-Semitism, and cancel culture. And so from the left, there's something from the Hollywood Reporter. From the right, there's something from the Daily Signal. And you can see that it's far right. It's not just right of center. And then another one from the left that's also just left of center. But if you click on that story, you'll be able to see every single, there will be additional treatments for that particular story. I find this is a really great way to become media literate so that you can see right in front of you how these stories get this different treatment.
Wow, that's awesome. I've never heard of this website, but I'll definitely be incorporating it into my own practice. And so my next question is for Fabiola. When as a reporter now, how do you, or what are some of the steps that you take to eliminate bias from your own reporting, from your own work?
Well, for me personally, I've always, as it is, tried to never have any bias whatsoever. For me, it's always, I'm going to tell you the facts and I'm going to tell you the way that they are. As it is, to tell a story, we only get a minute or so. And so you just jot down the facts, boom, 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 here it is. And then I'm a kind of a writer too that, yes, I like to include myself in the story, but not so much. The story is more your experts. The story is more, the people that you're interviewing. So for me, I put them a lot, I let them speak, and then I kind of just, use my voice to put, the sound bites or the interviews into one, but I let them tell the story. I just kind of guide it to piece together and make sense, but I let them tell the stories. And in that way, it helped me obviously not be biased in any way whatsoever. But facts, just put the facts, put the story out there on what it is and how it is.
Excellent. So sticking to the facts, but then how do you determine what sources to include into a story? How do you know that what you're reporting is fact and not misinformation or bias from the source you're getting it from?
Well, one of those things when it comes to the sources is we always obviously have the sources that you always go to. So right now with COVID-19 that is happening, our sources are the health department. So in us, any information that the health department gives us, it's information that we're going to report. Anything that police give us, it's information that we're going to report. When it comes to police, for example, you're trusting that they're going to give you the right information and they're going to give you the right facts. And what they say, it's what it is. So it just depends what sources you go through. It can be very difficult when you start getting like statistics from the internet. Those are obviously words. One that I always try to rely on is like Associated Press, or like we're an NBC and CBS station from them, to localized stories, because I do work on a lot of like local stuff. So usually there's already articles out there that have all the information, and then I just have to localize it. So that makes it a little bit easier sometimes.
I have a follow-up question for that. As a local affiliate to some of the larger organizations, when you are working on a local story and you don't have a bigger national story to fall back on, or other sources to fall back on, and you're working on something much more local, how often does something come across your desk that is a local citizen claiming to have information, and how do you follow up with local information and claims?
Yeah. Well, personally, I'm not an investigative reporter at our station. So any story that does involve any investigation that deep, where somebody comes and claims. So for example, we get, a lot of people saying right now, well, I work for this company and so many people tested positive. We need someone to look into and investigate it. That is not, unfortunately, my job. I have to hand it off to our investigative reporter. But I do know that our investigative reporter goes through the health department and those sources first before doing any further investigations. And we do have investigative reporters do have such training to be able to go through a lot of sources, investigations, fact checks. I mean, they have their list because they don't just turn something in the day of. They actually take weeks to put these stories together. I'm not an investigative reporter, but it would be interesting definitely to be able to work on something so deep like that. And I think you have to get attached to that story for a while in order to make sure that you cover all bases.
Very cool. Faith, we received an insider look at what it was like when you were working at KC24. Let's take a look at this. What's going on in this image?
Well, it's so funny because Terry and I have been posting a bunch of old photos recently. I want to point out some things. Well, I'm on a phone. It's a corded phone. It's attached to that device there, so they have to be used together. If you look to screen right on the table there, that big kind of gray thing, that's called a Rolodex. So that's where I kept all my contacts. The police, fire, the different stories that I was covering, that was in the Rolodex. If you look at the bottom left of the screen, that's a cigarette. people smoked in the newsroom, and you can see that there are a lot of cigarettes in that ashtray. That's an ashtray. And then right above that, it's a typewriter. We didn't have computers at the time. We had typewriters. And if you look
where's your
above
smartphone?
me, my smartphone, no, there were no smartphones. There were no computers. We had no newspaper archive. Anything that we covered, if we wanted to look something up, we had to go to the library, walk to the library and look it up. This was the old this is the KPBS, I'm sorry, not KPBS, I'm thinking San Diego. This is the KVPT building. We're on Van Ness Avenue. That's where we used to work before we moved out by the airport. Yeah. But above my head also is the Thomas Guide. That was the map we used instead of Google Maps. We had a big, thick kind of binder of maps of the city and county, and that's how we found our way around. We also had a reverse telephone directory. We did not have the tools that we have now. So it was an entirely different type of reporting that we did. We had to rely on public officials to give us accurate and true information. And we had to verify witness accounts. We couldn't just take one person's word. We had to be able to verify that with 2 or 3 other people, or we could not go on the air with that information. But the stories that we told were very factually correct. Didn't always have a lot of background because we didn't have that background.
Crazy.
And you still look beautiful, Faith. You haven't changed a bit or aged a bit. It's great. And that, by the way, was right across the street from where CMAC is, which is the Fresno Metropolitan Museum. So I figured out I've been there for 16 years between KC and CMAC. So I guess you call that my hood.
Yeah, well, and Terry and I did. We worked together back in 1985. And when Natalie or Kyle just zoomed in, I noticed that I was using Stephanie's phone book. There's Barugian, takes up the whole phone book.
Shout out to Stephanie Barugian and her phone book. Yeah. Very cool. But yeah, you mentioned there's so many tools that we have at our fingertips now, with quick access to the internet, quick access to archives, maps, instant messaging on Facebook. You can DM someone on Twitter or Facebook really quickly and get a response rather than playing telephone tag. Fabiola, how do you utilize more modern tools in your reporting?
Well, let me tell you, right now with everything that's happening with coronavirus, this has become my best friend because a lot of time, so right now at our station at KC24 and CBS 47 as a reporter, I am not able to go into the studio that they want to be able to keep us, only a few of us going in there. So I'm working remotely. So that means if there's something going on and the photographer's not close enough by me and I have to shoot it, I have to shoot with my phone. I have to edit with my phone. And actually, I just recently did a story, shot with my phone, all of it edited on my phone and everything. And it was actually a good feeling because Now I realize I don't have to carry a laptop and a big camera around. I can just carry this. But I utilize my phone and the technology we have nowadays to be more efficient and to do a quick turnaround. So right now, with everything that is happening, I need to be able to post things right away. And sometimes we post things right even before the newscast. And I don't think that was really a thing before. Now, too, you're competing against so many other people. You know, the story that I'm able to get is maybe already up on the social media by the time that I get to it. And so those are the things too that you have to deal with. Before, for example, quick example I'm just gonna throw out there is when there's, you know, there was an earthquake and things happened, usually you would turn to news reporters or people to figure out what happened, was there any damage, how big was the earthquake. Now, when there was that earthquake, everybody in my timeline was giving information. And then some were giving information of the initial magnitude of the earthquake, which was not accurate because that changed. And so I'm able to usually update and stuff. And so then that was a moment that I realized, like, wow, like everybody is posting about it. Like, it's not just me as a reporter that I'm posting about anymore. So it's also worrisome because you're like, well, people don't need to turn to me anymore because everybody became a reporter with, you know, the stories and the Instagram and Facebook. So yeah, it's been a different type of times. The phone obviously is powerful, but it also can work against you.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable how basically everything in that picture on Faith's desk has been shrunk into mobile devices. But that is something we wanted to ask about. Citizen journalism is something that's really taken off over the last few years, especially with everyone having an outlet on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, you know, whatever, TikTok, Byte, whatever the latest social media platform is. What are you doing that citizen journalists aren't doing? And I know we've talked a bit about your fact checking, your double checking with your sources beforehand. What else does a more traditional reporter do that is legitimizing the stories that you're covering?
You know, something that I use a lot of too is our website, because people may be able to share what Fabiola Ramirez posted, and it might get to someone who doesn't know who Fabiola Ramirez is. And so for people to really know if it's true or not, obviously they have to know me. But when I use yourcentralvalley.com, which I know a lot of people in the Valley know what it is, it sort of gives it that extra trust, because people obviously are going to trust the website of a news station more than just a person who they don't even know that works for news. So I always try to link my stories back to the website, and especially because in the website, after they read that story, they'll have other stories that they'll know, okay, this is local news. They have all these articles. So I always use our website as a way to make sure that people understand, like, hey, this is true information, true facts, and look at all the other articles that I've published with them.
Yeah, and at that point, it does become the archive, you know, that other people can refer to. Yeah, the website really does legitimize a lot of the reporting. Kind of in the same vein, you know, on the website, or you know, God forbid something happens and some misinformation does get reported, and something that happens in more mainstream news is a retraction. And I guess citizen journalists just do a follow-up tweet and delete the original tweet. But when something does get reported and it is proven to be inaccurate and a retraction does get published, what do you do? But you know, both Fabiola or Faith, something that you used to do, to get the right information out, or you are correcting someone who has posted incorrect information or misinformation. Because something that we talked about earlier this week was the idea that once once something is out in the world and it's been retweeted, it's been shared, or you've heard it multiple times as in conversation, you may misremember the information. What do you do, or what have you done when a retraction, when the correct information has come out, to try to counteract the incorrect information? Faith, what are some things that you've done to get the correct information out?
Yeah, well, and I can address this from what we did in the past, and that was we would run a correction on the air, because when I left KC24, it was 2013, where we were really just starting to post a lot of stuff on social media. Before that, it was more like follow me and isn't it a beautiful day, but we really weren't posting a lot of content. Now, content goes directly to social and directly to digital before it ever goes on the air. So it's a different dynamic. But at the time, yes, immediately we would put a retraction up or a correction up, and we would make sure that we would run that correction on the same newscast as well. And if it was something that was potentially defamatory, we would make sure to run it on all of our newscasts. Mm-hmm. Now it's so difficult because there were so many sources. As soon as it goes out on social media, it's out there. When it gets shared and it gets screen captured, there's no control over correcting that message. And you'll notice that very few organizations now will actually post corrections, at least not on social media. They may post it on their website. Fabi, you probably have more experience with that.
Yeah, how do you handle corrections nowadays?
You know, it's simple as for example, the only example I can think of right now is like when I was out at the fires, we would go out in the morning with the fire crews, and they would give us a number of containment and a number of acres. So what I would do is I would tweet out, this is the update for Monday morning for this fire. And it did. An hour later, they came back and like, we're sorry, we gave you the wrong information. That was actually not the accurate information. It's actually these many acres and this much contained. It actually grew way more than we thought. So then I did take it back to Twitter, and I said, there is an update from fire officials who say, actually, this is the right number. In that matter, I know it wasn't my fault. There was nothing I could control, but I'm not going to go and delete the tweet and then just pretend like it didn't happen. And so those are the instances where you correct it and you make sure that you post about it again. So those who did retweet it or those who did share it or commented or spread the word about it can update their stuff too, and update, people that they've let know what the update is. But, it could happen. And a lot of times it is out of your control. Yeah,
there's so much, there's so many tweets flying around that you sometimes get lost in the noise. But yeah, thank you for your diligence at trying to make sure that the accurate information is up there. Natalie, we have some questions coming in. What do you have for us from Instagram?
Yeah, well, actually, Maricela has our Instagram questions going. So, Maricela, can you share a question with us, and we'll get it answered?
All right. Hi, everyone. So this question is from Andrea Franco, and she is asking for tips that she can use to explain media lit to the older family who don't understand the internet.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
An open question to both Faith and Fabiola.
So maybe you have some family members posting or sharing some stuff online, and how do you
Mom does, and she doesn't know whether it's legit or not. So I totally understand that question.
Yeah. What would you do if you saw some friends or family members posting some?
I can take on that one because I have an uncle who posts and shares everything without even knowing where those sources are coming from. And it's scary because at times I'm like, if you post something that is wrong and inaccurate, you're only spreading the bad things. So the way I do it with also my parents is I always try to explain, have that one or two sources that you go to that you share information from. of course, for my parents, it is yourcentralvalley.com because that's who I work with. But I always tell people, you're able to download the local news apps, CNN app, those apps that you have on your phone that you get notifications from, rely on those. And if you do see something on the internet that you want to share, but are not too sure about the source, go and Google it and see if the websites that you do trust or the networks that you do trust are sharing a similar story. So that way you can share from them. I see it a lot on my family. I have a lot of family who just loves Facebook, and I see it very often, unfortunately. And sometimes I tell them, if you're not sure about if you should be posting this or not, just don't post it at all.
Yeah. I also have some family members and friends who hit that share button a little too quick. And I do worry sometimes, like I'll go to Snopes or Fact Check and I'll pull up that topic and be like, hey, I know that was a really exciting picture and story to share, but it's not accurate. I care about you. I want you to be able to make sure you're sharing important information. Because especially when it's like, I've seen it in the feed and it already has like 10 hearts on it, and I'm like, ooh, that's not a great look. Johnny is monitoring our Facebook comments. Johnny, what questions do we have from Facebook? Can you hit us with a question?
For sure. First of all, we're getting a lot of activity on Facebook in terms of comments. So we have folks watching and very engaged in the conversation. So thank you both, Fabiola and Faith, for all the information. We do have Angelica Hernandez, a CMAC member and Fresno State student. She asks the following. There is a growing number of reporters who are focused on something called solutions journalism. What responsibility do you think reporters have to cover? What responsibility do you think reporters have to cover on how people are responding to problems and not just the problems themselves?
So solutions journalism has really been making a lot of headway over the last 5 years or so. There's actually a solutions journalism network. There's a group of professors and journalists who are involved in promoting solutions journalism coverage. In fact, I'm part of a solutions journalism Facebook group. And the idea is exactly what Angelica said. It is covering the way communities and organizations and individuals respond to problems, and whether they solve them successfully or not, what they're doing to try to solve them. It's kind of, it is solutions journalism, but it's kind of telling stories about individuals and people and bringing important issues to the forefront. It's not a minute 30 story. And that, I think, is where the problem is for local television journalism, because that is the minute 30 or the minute 15 story. But there are a lot of public television stations and radio stations, and there are also many newspapers that are running solutions journalism stories because they have the time and the space to be able to do that. Fabi, I don't think you were there when we did the Global News Relay on solutions journalism, were you?
No.
It was probably right after your semester. And we did a whole series of stories around the world. We had about 15 other universities from different countries, and we all did solutions journalism stories. And it wasn't more difficult to cover. It was just that the length of the stories were much longer.
Interesting. Speaking of the Global News Relay, I have another insider picture here from Terry. This not only has Faith and Fabiola, but also Natalie. Does anyone remember what year this might have been?
2016.
Fabi, do you remember what the topic was? Was it sports?
This was a picture when we did the Global News Relay. It was either after or before our production, and it must have been at the beginning of 2016 or the end of 2015.
So I think this was the sports topic.
Yeah, I think you're right. Right. So it was right. It was the same year as the Summer Olympics, right? Yeah.
Must
Or was
yeah,
it when-
must
Yeah.
have
Right.
been- because we were supposed to have Summer Olympics again this year.
That's right, exactly. So it was the Summer Olympics, and this had to have been um, right afterwards, even though we all look like we're awake because we
I
were,
believe it's
most of us, up for about 48 hours.
it's
think,
March
Natalie, you and I-
2016, I think. March
It
2016.
was 2016.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's Edmer in the background, and I can't tell who else is there, but this was, I think it was 15 universities around the world, and we all covered stories on different types of sports. They were fantastic too, because it wasn't your run-of-the-mill football, baseball, basketball. It was, I mean, Natalie, you probably remember this better than I do because we've done several global news relays since then.
We had things like Quidditch and pickleball and,
Wow.
different activities for people with physical limitations and things like it. Yeah, it was really great to see a lot of different kinds of stories and not just, like Faith was saying, your run-of-the-mill football, baseball, all the common ones we're used to seeing here about, all of our major teams that we know of and stuff. So yeah, this photo was taken, I think, in the middle of it, and I don't know if you can tell, we're all exhausted because we've been up for like 20
Nobody
hours.
looks tired. I mean, and look at Joseph. He looks like he's just ready to go. It's great.
Yeah,
You're right. It was in the middle of it.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Awesome.
Actually, what I was the producer or director for this.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that.
Yeah.
You were the director. You were directing you and was it Angelica?
No, Angelica was the year after me, I think.
Got it.
She was in-
Okay, so it was you and somebody else that you were both directing.
Yeah, I believe it was
Sure.
Janet, if I remember.
Janet, yes.
That's
Janet.
right.
She's in that
Yes.
picture too, in the back right next to Natalie.
Yeah.
Well, this is a great segue into locally at Fresno State, we have a very robust MCJ program. If someone was interested, if we have high school students getting ready for college or something, and they were interested in journalism, Faith, can you tell us more about the program at Fresno State?
Yeah, it's a fantastic program, and it has grown so much since Fabi was there. We now have 3 professors that are part of the broadcast journalism, and it's broadcast multi-platform journalism now, because not only does it air on CMAC and on Comcast Cable, but we also have a dedicated website called FresnoStateFocus.com, where all of the stories appear in multimedia form. And
Awesome.
I noticed that Katie is on the Facebook page making comments, and we have several of Katie's students that have been absolutely fantastic. And I know that she really encourages students to take a look at the Fresno State program. It is, and I know I'm biased, it is, I think, one of the top programs in the country because students have much more of an opportunity to get hands-on experience in our program than they do at many of the other larger, well-known programs around the country. And the best part is our students get jobs, and you're looking at most of them right here at CMAC.
Some of us went there. I can say we learned some stuff there that really helped, I would say.
Right, and Caesar, I mean, even though, you took media law from me, I think, but other than that, you were the backbone of Fresno State Focus when you were here, and Natalie was, and Johnny, I mean, all of you have done so much to really further that program without even being broadcast journalism students. So in addition to broadcast journalism, we have public relations and advertising and filmmaking, and we don't call it print journalism anymore, but digital journalism, which is newspaper writing. All of it really is incorporated together. So there are opportunities for students to learn so many different skills. And if they don't want to go into a journalism field or a public relations advertising field or filmmaking, it's still great if you want to be a teacher, or if you want to work for a corporation, or if you want to go into counseling, because you are able to present well, and you're also really good at putting together videos that can tell stories. And plus the price is right too, especially if you're from the Fresno area.
So we have, I know Faith, you have to go. We really appreciate you hanging out with us and answering some questions. We do have just a few more questions on Facebook. Fabiola, are you able to stick around for a few more questions?
Yeah, that's fine.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. That time went by so quickly. I can't believe it.
I know.
I would love to do this again. Excellent topic. Thank you so much for offering this to everyone.
Yes, thank you for hanging out with us. All right.
Bye-bye.
See ya. All right. We have a great question from Steve on Facebook. Can the panelists speak to the investment in subscribing to local and non-local journalism sources? There are resistance from some people for paying for the news. So yeah, Faith showed us her folder of apps that she uses, and she mentioned that she does pay for some of them. The Fresno Bee has a subscription for both physical papers, but also more direct access to stories in their app and on their website. This can be open for anyone. Who here is paying for a subscription to any news, and why?
Yeah, well, I personally don't pay for it, but because my station pays for it, we get access to it.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, it's something that I feel like you can invest on, but also understand that there are free subscriptions, free apps. I mean, that you can get all the information that you want for free. I think a lot of people think that if they pay, they're getting the right information. That's not always the case. I think that if you look to see what free apps there are, for local people, I would say try to stick to your local news stations for local stuff. If you want to get, national stuff, then you can get national ones. I think it's good to have a little bit of balance of both, because you want to know what's going on around the world, but I think it's important to know what's really going on in your community. So I always say local news apps are free and accessible and ready to give you all the notifications and all the news that you need.
Yeah. Yeah, my family has always had a subscription to the Fresno Bee, and it's been great to support it. Ad supported news is great, but if you have a little extra money in your pocket to be able to support, it really goes a long way. It is kind of tricky when local newspapers are being purchased by hedge funds and trying to be streamlined for money efficiency, but I find that it's really, really important, because these smaller local news organizations are the ones that can end up breaking really big stories. Fabiola, you mentioned you have a number of investigative reporters at your station, and that's what sometimes cracks the case for some of the bigger stories, scandals, and reporting that takes longer to investigate. So if you're able to support local journalism, I highly recommend it. Maricela, I want to jump back to you on Instagram. What do you have for us?
Well, I have another question from One Up Vince, and he wants to know how what are the most if you could share, what are the most common techniques used for attracting young people's attention when using media, and when it comes to media literacy, and making sure, like, when it comes to young people, making sure they get all the facts and not just the hype.
Well, I like to do a lot of research. So I have two brothers who are in high school. So for me to figure out what exactly I can do to make them want to watch, I kind of put the experiment out there. So I started talking to them, and I'm like, okay, so where do you get your news from? And one of them was like, oh, well, Snapchat. And I'm like, oh, really? The other one's like, oh, Instagram stories. And so that's when you start seeing, like, wow, like, I should really get a Snapchat. And then someone said TikTok too. And those are the things where you're like, maybe I'm not in those social media outlets, but if that's what they're watching, then maybe I need to do that. So I actually went ahead and applied that. I started posting all my stories on my Instagram stories and to IGTV. Before I was like, oh, Instagram's more like my private thing for my friends and family. I wasn't really doing Instagram for news, because I did also get a message one day that said, I wake up in the morning and see your stories, and all I see are negative things, so I'm going to unfollow you. And at that moment, I realized, okay, well, I guess I need to have a balance of a little bit of both things. So I put good stories, bad stories, happy stories, sad stories. I put a balance of everything, but I do start sharing on my Instagram because that's how you're going to get the attention of the young ones. They're not going to, tune into the 6 o'clock news, and that is a fact. They're going to be on Instagram stories. So I started doing a lot of that lately.
Yeah, you kind of got to tap where they are. If they're mostly looking at Instagram stories or Snapchat stories, sometimes you have to repackage stuff to make that work. For our series of videos that we just did this week about media literacy, Natalie, Maricela, and I worked really hard to kind of repackage them for those formats as well. The full videos ended up on YouTube and on Facebook Watch and IGTV, but we also wanted to make sure that people got the basic ideas and were able to send them. If they found it interesting and wanted to learn more, they could make their way to the full video. But we at least tried to put the major bullet points into more accessible social media for sure.
And you hit a really good point, Kyle, that we're talking about citizen journalism and how everybody has a platform, and to reach those young viewers and the people who are essentially going to take our information forward, and they're going to use these tools or not use them. They're going to have platforms and people who they're going to talk to. Everyone has a community. So as a whole, if we have more people using their platform for ethical journalism and using, like you said, Fabi, having a good measure of, how do you keep them engaged? Because yes, it is biased and opinionated because it's yours, but it's through your lens. So the people in your community are going to understand that message through how you present it. So that's a really awesome point and silver lining to what we're all talking about. There's so much information. It can feel overwhelming trying to figure out what's real on Snapchat, what information am I getting from TikTok, and not everyone is going there for news. So all these things go back to the point that we have to know who's that author, what's the point, what's the information they're presenting, can I trust that information, are you telling me the truth, do you want me to do something with that information? So it's super important to keep that at the forefront. So I think that I guess I'm appreciative that you as a person that has that platform is taking the time to make sure that the message is truthful and clear, and hopefully we'll see more of that since there is so much information, that more of it will be credible and good, and that we can feel good about spreading that information without so much fact check.
And on the flip side, I would say citizen journalism does have its place. We're not here to poo-poo citizen journalism. A number of CMAC members who submit videos for us to play on the channel would consider themselves citizen journalists and are taking the deeper dives like investigative journalists that some of the more mainstream news is not able to take a deeper dive in, and able to get those scoops and bring those stories to the forefront. So there is a place and there is an outlet for citizen journalism. We like to think that CMAC is one of those outlets alongside social media. So yeah, I mean, those people out there are putting in the good work and getting stories, sharing a spotlight on these stories that might not get attention otherwise.
Yeah, no, and you know what? It's funny you mentioned that, because sometimes I don't know about something that's going on, and it's through people who follow me on social media. They'll send me a message and be like, "Hey, did you see this fire? Did you see this accident?" And I'm like, "Oh no, I didn't. Thank you so much for messaging me and letting me know about it. Do you have any pictures?" So yeah, everything. We appreciate people who share what's going on, who share pictures with us, and sometimes it is through them that we find out what's going on and we're able to get it on the news. It's because of the people who are actively watching and paying attention to what's happening.
Definitely. Yeah. Maricela or Johnny, what other questions do we have on social?
None at the moment after the last question we had on Facebook. I did want to mention, just for the record on this, since we are recording and all that, I didn't get a chance to extend my appreciation to Faith, us coming from the School of Journalism, if you will, I guess from Fresno State. I did have like Caesar, took some media law classes from her, and we delved in the media literacy thing. But one thing I wanted to mention was that something that really stuck with me that I remember specifically Faith mentioning, and it's something we actually mentioned in our media literacy video on the portion that Lisa talked about, was the 3 sides to every story component to journalism. You know, there's your side, my side, and the truth. And I specifically remember Faith saying that, and that's just something that stuck with me. And working in news a little bit too myself, that's something I've taken with me, and I think it's a really important sort of, in a way, a nutshell of how, you know, approaching journalism. So Fabi, do you use that kind of approach to your journalism as well?
Yeah, no, it's funny you said it, because she said it to my class too. I took one of her ethics class and she said it. So when you were saying, I was like, yep, I remember her saying that. No, of course, yeah, we use it all the time. And I think something I always use to when I tell a story, it's like, if you get the side from this person, you have to get this side. And if you don't have this side, but you do have this side, then it's not a complete story. I always try to think that if you don't have both sides, you can't tell the story. And if you have to hold the story till tomorrow so that you get the other side, then you hold the story till tomorrow so you get the other side.
I have a question for you, Fabiola. When you're out in the field as a reporter, what is the attitude of general people when you're out? Is there much hostility towards the media? What's that like, being out on the street now, reporting? What's the interaction with the public normally?
You know, it is different over the years. I've been in news for 4 years now. Before, it was a lot, you know, more appreciation, a lot more, you know, hey, thanks for telling the story. Thanks for, you know, spreading the word about it. Right now, well, you know, you're live outside a restaurant that, you know, has to close down or stuff like that. And even though people are not saying things to us, there's anger. There is a lot of anger out there, and, you know, you can tell. And even though it's not directed towards you, it does make your job a little harder. And, you know, if I had a message for anyone out there is, you know, don't blame the messenger. You know, whatever Gavin Newsom decides to make a new guideline or what he puts out there, I'm going to give you what, you know, the facts and tell you what he said. But we're just a messenger. So, you know, don't hate the messenger for it.
Yeah, very cool. I want to do one last check. Maricela, do we have any more, or what questions do you have coming in from Instagram?
Okay, so we have another question from Bag Chasing Precious, and she says, how do you spot fake sources? How do you spot
fake sources?
Or like, how do you know it's fake? Like, what are the red flags?
Some red flags, yeah. This is a good question for anybody. What red flags do you look for?
Well, I guess I can tell you guys what I see, and then you guys can also share. One of the red flags that I always see is if the name doesn't even sound familiar, first of all. If it's coming from a news source, or you go to the website and it's a name that you don't normally hear, like the top ones I mentioned, that should be a red flag right away. Faith earlier did say something that I didn't know about, and I learned was that when after the .com has, I believe she said CO, I was going to text her about it and ask her more, that already right there it's a red flag. And I didn't even know about that. So I think that's an important one to know that we can all note on. And then also, if you don't see too many people sharing about it, it's because maybe a lot of people are skeptical about it too. And so that's one thing that I always check too. Like, okay, let's see how many people are sharing, how many people are commenting, and read the comments too, because somebody might say, hey, this is not this is fake news. This is not a real article. Here's actually the truth. Somebody might link something. So I always read the comments too, because that can always make you, try to see different sides.
Definitely.
I'd say also, like, following along, looking at the author, looking at the source, but also look at who's cited in the source. One of the things we did during our media analysis breakdown video is, especially with Lisa's article, we combed through that whole thing, and we were looking at some of the experts they were quoting, and they're people with titles like data architect, but it doesn't link you back to like anything about that person or what organization they're with or anything like that. And that can be kind of a red flag as well if, the people they're quoting either are not experts in, like let's say we're talking about, in that case, we were talking about coronavirus, and they're citing a data architect who's not in the health field. That kind of is a red flag as well, because you're talking about a health related topic, but you don't have any health officials in the article that you're citing. That can be kind of a red flag if you're, just because they're not citing people who are in the field that they're talking about.
Yeah, and then just one last thing to that. Also in Lisa's video on Wednesday, we shared this media bias chart from Ad Fontes Media. And again, yeah, if you recognize the article is coming from one of these locations, the ones towards the top are going to be more fact reporting. And then, slowly as they move down, they do also skew left and right. But as you move further down the chart, they are less likely to be factual. And if they don't appear on this chart at all, you probably want to do some Google researching and figure out what it is it's coming from. So if you're seeing something in your Facebook feed and you're like, wow, that's crazy, I never heard of that, but it's, something you don't see on this chart or have never heard of, you may want to double check that source. It's tough. It does require you as the reader to go do some work. But yeah, I feel like to prevent my brain from turning into mush, I have to do it. Cool. All right. So we're hitting just over an hour and 20 minutes. I don't want to take up all day. So I guess we'll see if there's one last question, either from social media or from anyone here in the chat. What you got for us? Maricela?
I have one more question for Fabiola. What this you're relatively new in your career, and this is something that you're clearly passionate about. So I kind of just want to know, like, what are you hoping to achieve in terms of your contributions to this industry?
Good question. Yeah, I am actually very new. I've only been in news for 4 years, graduated from Fresno State in 2016. So getting into the news world was obviously not my plan, because I was a multimedia major and then I became a broadcast journalism major. So it wasn't like I grew up saying, I want to be a reporter and tell stories my whole life. It was something that even when I graduated college, I started applying for multimedia jobs, and that's it. And I wasn't getting anything. So I was like, okay, I'll give a try to this reporting thing. And then I got a job. So it was kind of meant to be. And when that moment happened and I saw, okay, maybe it is meant to be, it became kind of like, in a way, my responsibility. I felt like it was my responsibility that I need to be able to tell the stories. And not just the stories, the everyday stories, but the stories that you don't actually hear. I am Latina. I was born out of the country. I was born in Mexico, and I am an advocate for youth. So youth is, I feel like sometimes, the stories don't get told 100%. The stories of Latinos, with things that they struggle with. So I feel like that also is my responsibility. So for my community, my goal has become to tell the stories of those who maybe don't have the voice or the platform to say their stories. And I've taken that very seriously, especially because I'm one of the only Latinas in my station and one of the very few in the Central Valley. So it's a lot of pressure lately, but I like it because I have a lot of different Latinos who come to me and say, hey, I want the story to be told, and nobody's paying attention to me. Nobody's listening to me. Nobody has even really reached out or replied to me. And so then that's when, those are kind of my goals, is to be able to tell those stories, stories that matter here in the community in the Central Valley. But maybe it's not that nobody cares. It's just that maybe sometimes they're pushed off to the side. And so that's one of my goals, is just to tell the stories of my community and hope that they make a difference, whether it's a small little difference, but hope that they do. Yeah, that's so important. That's very, very cool. So thank you, Fabiola, not only for helping share the stories of the community and those who might not have the opportunity to, but thank you for joining us this afternoon and
being so gracious to answer all of our questions and our extended friends on the internet's questions. Thank you to Faith. I know she had to go, but just shout out to her. And thank you to everybody who submitted a question, both here in the panel and online. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone who's followed our Media Literacy Week. It was a lot of work to pull off, but we're really happy that everyone who's gotten a chance to check it out and shared their thoughts with us. We really appreciate it. We hope to have future discussions about media literacy. So this isn't it from us. We're looking to do some more. And I want to extend an invitation. We have a workshop next Tuesday evening. Fabiola, you mentioned you have to film and edit your videos entirely on your phone. We're gonna have a workshop to everyone. It's open. You can see cmac.tv/workshops and sign up for our editing on your mobile device workshop. So
I believe that's actually on Wednesday, Kyle.
Or Wednesday, yes, it's on
22nd.
Wednesday evening. The last one was on a Tuesday. So,
Yes.
So we're also committed to help put the tools in people's hands to be able to tell their stories as well. All right, thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys. Thank
All right,
you.
see you later.